So for today's laptop comparison, we've got a real David and Goliath fight here with the Alienware's new X16 laptop versus the big bad Alienware M18, the largest Alienware laptop on the block. So we're going to help you try and decide whether you go for the more premium X series range with its thinner, lighter and more feature-packed set, or do you go for the full power big bad boy, the Alienware M18? Now I've set ourselves a £3,500 budget for both of these machines. So for £3,500 on the Alienware X16, we're getting the i9 13900 HK CPU and an RTX 4080. We also get 32GB of RAM, but it's soldered on, and a 1TB SSD. Now for that same £3,500 on the M18 range, I managed to get the 13900 HX CPU with more cores than the HK, an RTX 4090, but we've only got 16GB of RAM and a 512GB SSD. But the good news is you can upgrade the RAM and you can upgrade the SSD yourself for a fraction of the cost of Dell's upgrades. Right, so let's get started looking at these machines. So first things first, obviously we're going to be looking at the size, and it looks kind of ridiculous. The 16-inch laptop looks pretty big until you bring in the Alienware M18. A heavy 4kg chunky solid laptop, and it does look massive compared to the X16. You can see when I put them side by side how much deeper it is and also how much wider it is. It also feels ridiculously heavy and it is quite a bit thicker. But if you can forego all of that, this M18 is an absolute beast. So to start, I want to talk about the build quality and the colours. Well, you can see straight away they are a completely different colour scheme. The X series range gets the lunar light vent, the aluminium lid and the dark side palm rest. Now, the look is growing on me, but I don't like the fact they've got so many different materials on this laptop. But the actual build quality is fantastic. It feels solid yet light and is a really great feeling machine. The M18 on the other hand, it's just dark side of the moon colour. And that isn't a problem for me. I much prefer this all sort of blacks and gunmetal greys on this laptop. Still feels very solid, but you certainly know it when you pick it up with 4kg. It is heavy, but there's still no creak and it does feel solid. So build quality on both these machines is great. And it's a big step up from the M17R5 or the M15R7 cheaper range from last year. This does feel like a much more premium laptop. Now for the port situation, the Alienware X series puts all of the ports of the laptop at the back. Now it does keep the laptop looking very clean, but personally if you're plugging things in and out regularly, I do find it a little bit annoying, especially the headset jack and the micro SD card. It's a real shame having to try and find your way around the back of the machine to plug those devices in. Now the M18 has a slightly better port selection and a slightly better port location. We've got two USB-A's on the side and an RJ45 plus a headset jack. And on the other side, we've got a USB-C. So there's a good range of ports at the side. Now at the back, we've got a Thunderbolt 4 and another USB-C, an HDMI 2.1, a mini display port, and a USB-A and a full-size SD card reader. So it is a better port selection, obviously being a large notebook, than the X16. But there are some strange questionable choices as why do you put the full-size SD card reader at the back and an RJ45 at the side? But otherwise, a really great selection of ports on this machine. Right, so let's open these machines up and take a look inside. So opening them both up, they do look very similar and they've both got that Alienware look to them. Now you'll notice straight away that the M18 has still got the Alienware head power button, and I do love that, and that's something that's missing on the X16. We've actually got just an ordinary power button integrated into the keyboard. With regards to the RGB, the X16 takes quite an advantage over the M18 because not only do we get a lit touchpad in comparison to a plastic touchpad on the M18, which feels a lot cheaper, and we also get the mini LED Tron ring on the X16, which looks absolutely fantastic, whereas the M18 gets just the single zone Tron ring that we've had for a few years. And they've both got the RGB alien heads at the back as well. Now you will notice a difference in the keyboards between these two models. Because the M18 is so much bigger, we actually have a number pad on this model. So if you are looking for a laptop with a number pad, Alienware are finally back with you with the M18. And with regards to the actual keys themselves, they all feel great and they both have mechanical keyboard options if that's something that you like. I've got the scissor switch in mind and they feel absolutely fantastic. But the mechanical feels like a cherry blue and it's also a great keyboard. I've tested it in the past. Now the X16 has the row of multimedia keys at the far side of the keyboard, Because the M18 has an actual number pad, it doesn't get that there, but it has some multimedia keys above the actual number pad, so you're not missing out by having the number pad on this keyboard. And with regards to the actual speaker sound system, you'll notice that there's speaker grills on either side of the keyboard on the X16 and nothing on the M18. The X16 laptop has a 6-speaker system setup, whereas the M18 only has a 2-speaker, and they sound like this. Speaker test of the Alienware X16 versus the Alienware M18. We'll be at 50% volume to start, and they're both using the same music EQ. Now 80%. An easy win for the Alienware X16 there. Despite the M18 having a much bigger chassis, it still sounds quite tinny, and it certainly isn't as full of sound as the 6-speaker system in the Alienware X16. Now moving up to the screens, they've both got a 2560 by 1600 display panel, but obviously this is an 18-inch, this is a 16-inch. Now the X16 has a 240Hz panel, whereas the M18 has a 165Hz panel. You can also buy a 1080p version on the M18 that's a 480Hz if you're an esports player, but I think you will start seeing those pixels at 1080p on an 18-inch. So personally, I think this is a good panel to choose if you're buying the 18. Now with regards to these screens, they are both great panels. I was a bit worried about this 165Hz because a lot of the other competitors are using 240Hz 500 nit panels, but this is still a pretty bright panel, and it's still very fast with no ghosting, and it feels as fast as this 240Hz panel. So if you buy the M18, I don't think you'll be disappointed with this screen. Above the screen, both these machines have Windows Hello IR facial recognition to log you in, and the webcams look and sound like this. So this is a test of the webcam and the microphone on the new Alienware X16. And this is a test of the webcam and the microphones on the Alienware M18. So now let's power both these machines down and look at the internals. So getting into both of these laptops is relatively easy. You take a few screws off and you prise off the base panels. Now I have to be honest, the M series range is harder to get off, and I had to use a pry tool to pry that panel off. But once inside, the M18 takes the win for upgradability by a mile. Now, if you buy the higher ranged M18, so the 4080 or the 4090, you get a great selection of SSD ports. You get the two 80mm Gen 4 drives. You also get two 30mm Gen 4 drives, giving us 4 SSD options. Plus, we get 2 upgradable RAM slots and an upgradable Wi-Fi card. So that's absolutely fantastic. Now, the X16, being obviously slimmer and more compact, you only get 2 M.2 SSDs, and that RAM is soldered on. The Wi-Fi card can be changed, but I still can't forgive Dell for soldering on the RAM. And when it comes to the cooling for both of these machines, they've both got great cooling setups. The X16 has a 4-fan system, a vapor chamber, and the Element 31 compounds. Now the M18 has an unusual cooling looking solution. We've got the 2 main fans shooting hot air out the back and the sides. We've got another fan shooting hot air out of just one side, and there's a funny tiny little fan shooting air over the RAM slots, which is quite unusual, but obviously keeping that motherboard and RAM at a cooler temperature. So that would be interesting to see how well it performs. So in order to compare both of these laptops in our usual benchmark and gaming test suite, we made sure that both of the laptops were running in their overdrive performance, which is the highest performance available in the Alienware Command Center. To start with, we tested the CPU, and running Cinebench R23, the M18 scored 50% higher in a multi-core test over the Alienware X16, simply because that M18 has got 10 more cores than the X16's HK CPU. And if it's a productivity workload you're going to be doing on these laptops, you're going to see a real difference with that M18's HX CPU. Also, with its bigger chassis and large cooling fans, the M18 was able to hold higher wattage. It was boosting over 160 watts and then held 130 watts solidly through the Cinebench test. Whereas the Alienware X16 managed to boost to about 130 and drop down to about 105. And that really did make a difference to these scores. Then quickly moving on to Geekbench 5 for the single core and the multi-core score tests. Now this is quite a quick test, so you're not relying on the long-term boost. And we certainly found again that the single core was very similar between these two, with the M18 slightly beating the X16, but the multi-core score, as per the Cinebench, was massively in the M18's favour. Moving over to the 3D synthetic benchmarks and starting with Time Spy, the M18 was obviously going to win here. Not only has it got the 4090 over the Alienware's X16 with 4080, because these were the same price, you're obviously paying less for the M18 range, but it was also able to run at slightly higher wattages, but on both the CPU and the GPU. This led to a Time Spy increase of 24% in favour of the M18, and when we look at just the GPU scores, the 4090 scored 22% higher than the 4080. Running through the Firestrike benchmarks and the normal game benchmarks, you can see how much better it's performing than the X16. But with both of these machines coming with the 2560 by 1600 displays, either of these graphics cards will easily be able to power any AAA title at probably max settings and get great frames per second. And gaming on both these machines was a really comfortable experience. So if you do just plan on gaming on your laptop, you're really not going to notice much of a difference moving down from that 4090 to the 4080 in the majority of situations. With regards to the actual fan noise and the profiles, the one thing that was quite interesting is each of the actual profiles were very similar in fan noise. So it's obviously something Dell have tried to work on this year. But leaving the laptop in performance mode, the M18, despite drawing higher wattages than the X16, did remain quieter for longer. And with regards to external temperatures, both these laptops remained incredibly cool, as I discussed in the review of each of these machines. The touchpad and the palm rest on the M18 and the X16 is just amazing to game on. So if you're buying these laptops to actually game on the laptop themselves, it's a really comfortable experience. Now, in my personal opinion, gaming on the actual laptop itself is an easy win for that Alienware M18 for that much bigger screen. If I've got that 18-inch 16x10 panel, I don't feel like I want to be plugging into an external screen because I can't cope with the actual little screen I'm using. But with the X16 and its 16-inch 16x10, although I can get away with it in a pinch, if I was going for a long-term gaming session, I'd want to plug in a monitor. So with the performance section out of the way, let's take a quick look at battery performance and power. Now on battery, both these perform incredibly well, as do most Intel gaming laptops. But when it comes to actual battery life, the X16 clearly had the upper hand here, with 6 hours of battery life powering this smaller screen. The M18, on the other hand, in the same conditions, only managed to get 4 hours. But you don't really expect that much more from such a giant gaming laptop. You've got to power that 18-inch powerhouse of a screen. So obviously, along with the portability of the laptop and the battery life, if you're moving around with this machine, the X16 is clearly the winner. Another point worth mentioning, with the premium X series line, you also get PD charging, up to about 100 watts. So that means if you're in a pinch and you haven't got your power adapter with you, you can use a USB-C charger, plug it into your actual X16 and keep it going, and it does very well for office and very light 3D tasks. The M18, on the other hand, you need to use your actual charger. There's no PD charging. And I think that's such a shame that they don't offer that, because this is still a very expensive laptop. And talking of the chargers, both these machines were supplied with their 330 watt slim GAN charger. It really is a fantastic charger, having used the brick from years ago, and I know some people with the M18 have received the brick, but in the UK, on all of their actual listings for the M16 and M18 range, they are offering the slim chargers. And it is so much easier to put this slim 330 watt GAN charger in your bag with your laptop. So that takes me through to the conclusion. Now these are two great machines. The performance is excellent this year, but unfortunately the price is not. These are both very expensive at £3,500 in the UK. Now when you're choosing a laptop, there are a lot of things to take into consideration, and the first thing is obviously the size. So if you're looking for a 16-inch or a more portable laptop, then you're probably going to be looking this direction, or the M16 over this giant M18. But if size isn't a concern, you can't help but be impressed with how much they fitted into this M18 chassis. The performance and the upgradability is absolutely excellent on this M18. Now with both of these being the same price, I personally would have to choose this M18. I'm not so bothered about the size of a laptop. Once it's on my desk, I don't care how big it is, and I can still fit this in a bag and carry it around with me. But then once it's on my desk, that 18-inch screen is absolutely incredible for gaming on, also great for productivity work, and I love the fact I can put a ton of SSDs in this machine and upgrade the RAM. The 4090, although it isn't a massive improvement over the 4080, considering these are the same price, is the icing on the cake. And then lastly, when it comes to the CPU, the HX processor with its higher core count performs so much better in this machine than the HK CPU in the actual X16. So realistically, I think unless you need that better speaker system and a more portable laptop, I personally think this M18 is the better buy. Well, that's my thoughts on these two laptops. As usual, I'd love to know what you guys think. Which would you choose between this M18 or this X16 at this same price? Pop it in the comment section down below and I'll get back to you. And as usual, thank you for watching.